Erev Tavatai. Last week, our friend Rabbi Yonatan, he asked us about the issue of music on the 3 weeks. I didn't really get a chance to talk about it, I talked about weddings. But now we have to talk specifically about music, So I just have to give you a little bit of background about this, about music. What's this issue with music? So it says in two places, there's Masechet Gittin and Masechet Sotah. It says there, Memchet, that when the Bet Din, the High Court, the Sanhedrin, was dissolved. When was that? When the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, about the same time. The rabbis outlawed, they forbade to have public music. Not only on the 3 weeks, all the time. They outlawed this. So, the question is, you have to ask right away, what does music have to do with the Bet Din? I can understand if you tell me the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, we're sad, Okay, but it doesn't say that. It says when the Bet Din was dissolved. What does the Bet Din have to do with music? This is the question, So explain over there the Rishonim. There's the Rif, there's the Meiri. They say that the thing was like this, when the Bet Din was still alive, right, existing, if they would do some kind of a party, the Jews, right, and there would be something dirty there, not clean, something not wholesome, not rated G, right, as we say, right, it was a little bit dirty stuff there. So the Bet Din, would hear about it and say, listen, you're not allowed to do things like this. You know what I mean? This kind of party, we don't want, we don't want these dirty parties, This is not Times Square over here, you know what I mean? It's not Manhattan, What are you doing? But the problem was, once the Bet Din was dissolved,
nobody can do it.
Nobody was there to object, So now they're going to have dirty parties, bad parties. This is the reason why the rabbi said, we don't want public music in parties anymore. Parties with music. It says Tosfot, but Seudat Mitzvah is something else, right? If you're doing a mitzvah, like let's say you're doing a wedding, right? They will never goes around things like this. You know what I mean? What are you going to do? Music without wedding? Wedding without music? No such a thing like that. You cannot do such a thing like that. Or Brit Milah or Bar Mitzvah, right? Seudat Mitzvah. Over there, the minhag was always to do music, there. Nobody talked about this. We're talking about Seudot, which are, parties which are not Seudat Mitzvah. Seudot Chol, Yeah. What's an example? Birthday party, Birthday party is not Seudat Mitzvah, I mean, what? Okay, so you turned 50, right? You became a 50-year-old. So what? Is a mitzvah now to bring a musical there? No mitzvahs like this. You know what I mean? Happy birthday to you, Very good, Baruch Hashem. You should live a long life. But why do you need music for? What do you need? It's not nothing, not Seudat Mitzvah. Okay, so that's the idea, right? That's what it says in Tosot. So this is the reason, according to the simple meaning, right, why music was outlawed, when the Bet Din was dissolved. Now, here's the thing, right? This is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, this halakha. It's not only the Gemara, brought down in the Rambam Shulchan Aruch. But here's the thing, right? When it comes to the 3 weeks, we don't see in the Shulchan Aruch, that the rabbis made another gezerah, not to listen to music during the 3 weeks. No such a thing like this in the Shulchan Aruch. No such a thing like this in the Talmud. No such thing. You know why? Very simple. The reason is because they already covered it the first time they decreed on it. They said don't listen to music all the time. So what difference does it make, 3 weeks or not? I'm sorry, Mechila.
Can you listen to music right now?
We're going to talk about that. So we'll get to it, Bezrat Hashem. So here's the thing, right? The rabbis never made, a special din about 3 weeks, not to listen to music. No such thing like this. So how did this come in, all of a sudden, this minhag that we have today? Doesn't say in the Talmud, doesn't say in the Rambam, doesn't say in the Shulchan Aruch about this, So the first time we see it is in the Magen Avraham. Right? Magen Avraham was after the Shulchan Aruch a little bit. Also, long time ago, 400 years ago, 450 years, Magen Avraham. Ashkenazi, one of the big Achronim. So he says over there, the Magen Avraham, the minhag is that we don't do parties, on the 3 weeks. So what does that mean, parties? Music and dancing, right? We don't do things like this. No dancing, no music, dancing. We don't do. That's what it says there. So it doesn't say there, anything about a person privately, listening to music on his headphones, you know what I mean, or something like this. Doesn't say nothing about that. Or in his car, you know what I mean. Doesn't say nothing about this. There's also another source, which I saw, which is Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Shalom. He writes in Igrot Moshe. He explains over there the minhag, according to Magen Avraham. He says the minhag is that we don't do music in public, to display simcha, during the 3 weeks. This is the minhag. This is what the Magen Avraham was talking about also, So in other words, he adds a little bit more than the Magen Avraham. Well, because Magen Avraham says it's only when you dance, really, But Rav Moshe Feinstein comes and says it's not only dancing, but also like to do public music, not loud.
You just did Lasat Sefer Torah when you make to the other shoot.
It's also mitzvah.
But should you do it in a different date, or you can do it like...
Different discussion. We're not going to get into it now. I want to get more into the basic idea here, So, as we said, right, Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says, so what does that mean? You shouldn't have like a concert, during the 3 weeks. Concert, bring, some band, to play. Nobody's dancing there, but, it's a public event. So it says Rav Moshe Feinstein, this is also asur. Why? Not because of the Talmud, because of a minhag. It's a minhag like this in Am Yisrael. So, I'll tell you something more. It says in the Gemara Sotah, Memchet, it says over there that when they made the Gezerah not to listen to music, it didn't apply to every case. There are certain cases where it doesn't apply. So it says there in the Gemara, I'll tell you a case where it doesn't apply. For instance, let's say you're playing music, at a workplace because you want to increase, the productivity there. When people listen to music, they feel better, they work better, they're in a good mood. You know what I mean? So what does that mean? This is not for simcha, this is for productivity. So, therefore it's mutar. That's what it says over there in the Gemara. The rabbis never talked about things like this. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, simcha. You're making a party. You're making a concert. This is not for productivity. It's for joy. To have a party. It's something else. Two different things. Understand? So what do we see from there? This Gemara. It also talks about other things over there. But the point is that whenever the general rule is like this, whenever the music is not for simcha, it's for some kind of a benefit, besides simcha, something else. It's mutar. Only when it's for simcha, it's asur. So therefore, there are some people who want to say all kinds of things because of this, For instance, in the Or Letzion, right, Chacham Ben Zion, he writes over there that if a person, suffers from depression, or nervousness, he's very edgy, nervous. Atzbani, Israeli type of guy, So, you're allowed to listen. Why? Because he says, that this is not for simcha, this is just to relieve your bad mood. You know what I mean? This is what it's for. It's not for simcha. Another example, right, we see that when it's not for simcha, it's okay, Also, what else do we see is that when it's not in a public forum, concert or party, it's okay because the rabbis will never go there on things like this. Even the minhag is not like that. So we see from here, right? I remember one time somebody asked me, Rabbi, I want to go, and exercise. Like I want to walk in the street, jog a little bit, brisk walk. Or I want to do aerobics, So are we allowed to listen to music? According to what we just said, it's mutar. Why? Because this is not for simcha. You know what I mean? This is just to exercise, right? So you can get by. Another thing, which I heard from, who it was, right? Rav Mutzafi. Now Mutzafi said, there's another thing, which is that sometimes people are, as we said, right? People are depressed. So the reason why they listen to music is to get out of the depression, This is the thing, So here's the thing, right? You know what he told us? The rabbi, he's right, by the way. People are generally depressed today, People, in other words, you can assume that a person is depressed. Everybody's in a bad mood. Nobody's happy. Huh?
They don't listen to music. That's why.
Well, let's talk about this. So people are just are generally, not happy, unhappy. You know why this is?
A lot of difficulties.
Right, exactly. Life is very hard. It's a hard life.
Financial.
You know, financial is a big thing. But there's also other things, you know. Some people can't find a shidduch. You know, some people, you know, have problems with, you know, shalom bayit, you know. They have a shidduch, but they're fighting all the time with their wife, you know. All the time. Machloket, balagan. Or, you know, with the children, right? Problems with the children, headaches, you know. This child has this problem, you know. This child has this problem. You know, I mean, each child has his own baggage. You know, bagage. You know, each one brings his own thing. Who can be happy, you know? The credit card companies are calling, you know. Where's the money? Did you pay this month? You know what I mean? They're sending you letters, you know, with a lawyer, you know, threatening you. We're going to sue you. You know, where's the money? You didn't pay this month. You're late. Now you have to pay $50 fine because you didn't pay on time. All these things, you know, people are depressed, they're down. You know what he said, right? Ramot Safi. He says, if we wouldn't allow people to listen to music today, you know where they would be, right? In Bellevue, you know, in the crazy house, you know, nut house. Because of the nervousness, you know, they can't take it. So what do we see from there, you know? That today, people are listening, you know, personally to music. On the headphones, you know, in the car, even in their house, you know. Not because of simcha, not because they want to make a party, because they just want to get you know, not be depressed. I mean, I listened to one guy, you know, the other day, at Bet Gabriel, you know. So he was talking, you know, he was worried about this, you know. He said, how am I going to work? You know, he works in some office or whatever. He says, how am I going to work? You know, there's not going to be any music. I'm not going to be able to concentrate on the work. You know? And he thinks it's asur. You know, I didn't even tell him, by the way. You know, I didn't bother to tell him. I was busy with something else. I don't even think he's going to listen to me, you know? Because people think, you know, oh yeah, everything is asur, everything. No, it's not true. Why? Who told you? You know, so a person who needs to listen to music to do his job has nothing to do with the minhag. I'm sorry, you know, according to what it says in the poskim. Nothing to do with that. You know? So a person like this, you know, he needs to just get out of depression, to get out of his problems. He can listen to music, you know. But here's the thing, right? Moshe Feinstein, he says something important over here. Which is, you know, yeah, okay, you know, if you're depressed, you got a problem, you know. You got nervousness, you're down. You're down. Okay, so, you know, listen to privately, you know, but don't make a public spectacle out of it, you know what I mean? You know, open up your speakers, you know, put them on the window, you know, and show, the whole street is going to be, you know, dancing. Who told you to do this? You know, you don't need that. You don't need that. You know what I mean? So do it for yourself. You know what I mean? In a private place. You don't have to show everybody. Don't make it into a public spectacle. You know, that's the whole thing, you know. So that's really the issue here, you know, when it comes to music. You have to know when it's allowed and when it's not allowed. So when is it not allowed? For sure, right? As we said, two things. Number one, you're making a party. Number two, you're making dancing. Number three, you're making concert, you know, things like this. This is for simcha.
But it's relevant for the whole 3 weeks, except Tisha B'Av?
I'm sorry?
I'm saying it's relevant for the whole 3 weeks,
Of course.
except Tisha B'Av, of course.
Tisha B'Av is something else, right? You know, it's a different thing, you know. Tisha B'Av, you know, I'll tell you, right? The story, true story, right? I tell people all the time. My rabbi, Maran Al-Mashal, Bro Ovadia, 2 days out of the year, I used to see him always he cried, you know. One was Tisha B'Av, always I see him crying. He cried. When was he crying? When we read the Kinot. You know, when he read the Kinot, right away he starts crying. So you see from there, right, that Adarabah, you know, a person, he shouldn't be listening to music. Not only that, but he should be crying on Tisha B'Av. You know what I mean? That's the mitzvah, you know, to be really, you know, to get into it.
Sometimes
you know, to
music makes you emotional, sad.
Yeah, you're right. That's true, you know, but, you know, that's the thing, you know, Tisha B'Av is a very severe kind of thing, you know. We try to avoid any kind of, you know, just the opposite, right? We want to be down, you know. We want to be down on Tisha B'Av. That's the whole point.
When was the second day, Rosh Hashanah?
Yom Kippur, he used to cry. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Day of Din, you know. So you know when he used to cry, right? When he read the Haftarah, Yonah. When he read Yonah, he would always, you know, in the middle of Yonah. Why was he crying in the middle of Yonah? What's the reason? You know why? If you know the story over there about, you know, what happened with Yonah, it's like a tragic kind of a thing, you know. So that used to really make him cry, the rabbi. You know, it moved him. He was very emotional, by the way, you know, about Maran. You know, he wasn't like a regular person. You know, like we're like cold a little bit, you know. We don't cry so much, you know. Maran, he cried all the time, you know. Like, I mean, I'm not talking about all day, you know, but, you know, like he was very easy to come to tears. Very emotional person, you know. That's the way he was. Okay, whatever. Anyway, the point is, Rabbi, you see from there, right, that there's no reason to worry about things like this, you know. for work, for productivity, to take out of depression, to stay in private, setting, headphones, or you're running, exercising, aerobics. This was never the minhag. The minhag is only, as we said, right, those things. Otherwise, not so. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen, Amen. Shomer, it's a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Zikut Yisrael. Le'avicha achil ba'alehem Torah mitzvot, shenomar Adonai chafetz, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.